is AEW's premier event, Double or Nothing, and it's back May 28th. Tickets went on sale this past Friday, but also you got Dynamite and Rampage, a full week of AEW action. You can go get your tickets right now at aewtix.com and access.com. And because of this moment and this event coming to town, we have a very special guest to bring on the show. Tony Khan is joining us, the owner, CEO, and GM. Tony, we appreciate the time. How are you feeling, my friend?
I feel great, Adrian. Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it, man.
No, of course. And look, before we get into everything going on with AEW, I do have to ask you because, of course, family owns the Jaguars. And in my opinion, when it comes to the NFL last season, one of my favorite moments was the comeback against the Chargers in the playoffs. And not just because a whole bunch of Raiders fans are here in Vegas. If you could, walk me through the emotions of that night in Duval.
It was an incredible night. You know, we were already riding such an emotional high coming off winning the division and a huge comeback at home against the Tennessee Titans. But then to follow it up in this big playoff game, a huge duel, two of the top young quarterbacks in football, and it was such an exciting environment to have a home playoff game back in Jacksonville. And then obviously we fell far behind in the first half, and the way Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence and all the Jaguars players rallied, and it was so great. The offense put it together in the second half, and the defense played so incredible and stepped up in the second half, and everybody really just turned it around. It was one of those incredible, unforgettable nights for all the Jaguars fans, and football fans all over the world saw that great comeback, and I think it reflected very positively on what an amazing job Doug Peterson has done as the head coach of the Jaguars.
No, it was absolutely spectacular. And with that said, very excited. It's time for us to talk wrestling. I don't know how we're going to get aggregated. I promise you, I'm not going to ask you about the release date for Fight Forever. I'm not going to ask you about CM Punk. I'm not going to ask you if you're interested in buying the WWE. Let's start off with Double or Nothing, because obviously it was your guys' first event. And to me, every time it's come in, it's been cool to talk to the wrestlers and kind of talk to them about growth, because every year AEW keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Last year's was phenomenal. One of my favorite wrestling events I've ever been to. But if I could, not to be your therapist, ask you to reflect a little bit. With you being the boss and this being your dream, writing out cards and shows when you were a little kid in school, to actually doing this for real, what do you say has been like the growth in yourself? Because of, like, let's be honest, last year was a very difficult situation, a lot of injuries, a lot of extracurricular activities. Like, where do you see the growth in yourself as running AEW?
No, I think we've had tremendous development in AEW. We've built ourselves into a worldwide company on in over 150 countries, and we've seen great growth internationally, and we still have got such a strong base domestically every week with the show Wednesday night on TBS every week at 8 p.m. and every Friday at 10 p.m. on TNT. So coming up tomorrow night on TBS, I think people will get a good look at how the company is in a very strong position right now with some really great stories and huge matches on tap for tomorrow night on TBS on Wednesday Night Dynamite. And we're on a great run of Wednesday Night Dynamite. I feel like so far this year, the show has been on a real roll of just great quality. And in particular, people really excited about what's happening around the AEW Championship. It was exciting to see a lot of the young wrestlers looking to challenge for the championship last week, those young pillars of AEW, and also very interesting what's happening around the Elite and the Blackpool Combat Club, and especially within the ranks of the Elite, and just so many awesome things happening in AEW every week. And it is a really exciting time for us coming out of Revolution, which is one of the best shows we've ever done. It was a great show in San Francisco. And now we're coming back to where it all began, which is right there in Las Vegas. We've got Double or Nothing is the next huge pay-per-view, and that's coming up Memorial Day weekend in May. There's tickets on sale now for Double or Nothing. It's an awesome event. I would highly recommend anybody who loves pro wrestling, you've got to attend the Double or Nothing in Las Vegas. And for all of you there in the area, you know, it's something we've brought into Vegas every year since we started. We had a brief period during the lockdown where we weren't able to travel out to Vegas, but we've had great experiences bringing AEW there, and I can't wait to come back in May. The tickets are moving fast. We've got a great advance, and we still have a couple months to keep moving tickets, which is really exciting. And already, based on what we've done and tickets sold, it's a great sign for the strength of the company. And I think for me personally, I love pro wrestling. That's why I wanted to get into the wrestling industry and launch AEW several years ago. And I still really enjoy it, working on it every week. Pro wrestling, if I wasn't working in the industry, I would love to watch wrestling every week and think about matchmaking, think about the different stories and potential rivalries in wrestling. And now being in the intersection of so many exciting things happening in the wrestling business and being the CEO of AEW, I get to watch it unfold week in, week out on TBS every Wednesday and TNT every Friday. And, I'm just having so much fun. I love AEW and I love pro wrestling. And I think the love of wrestling hopefully comes across in the presentation of AEW.
100%. No, 100%. And that's why I'm so thankful that it exists. And, from reflection, now I'm going to ask you about the future, because you talk about all these exciting things that are happening. Over the weekend, you guys started your House Rules tour. And shout out to you starting it in my home state of Ohio. But I kind of want to ask you, in the future, where do you see that going in terms of course, we're going to be weekly in all these different cities, but in terms of house shows and the schedule, do you see yourself doing 100+ shows in the calendar year throughout the U.S. and stuff?
Well, that's a very good question. It's a very specific number, 100. And we'll have to see. I think we're moving towards that number, certainly, because there's 52 live Dynamites every week. We're on live Wednesday night on TBS, including tomorrow night, with a huge lineup on TBS tomorrow for Wednesday Night Dynamite. And between those shows, the pay-per-views, live Rampage specials, and now the House Rules events, I think we're moving closer and closer to that number, yeah.
No, that's incredible. And another thing, talking about the future too, you see it across sports, the entire sports industry, whether it's basketball or football. One of the biggest things to enter is the inclusion of gambling and betting. And of course, you guys have had partnerships with DraftKings. And, there's been rumors that some in the industry are trying to make betting legalized. And I'm curious, obviously running AEW, is that something that's intriguing that you would be in support of, or do you think that would then become too complicated of a thing to handle and make sure everything's structured properly so no, funny business is going on?
Well, we're already doing it. It's a little interesting to see that all these states are talking about it, because frankly, DraftKings has a great partnership with AEW and they're offering propositions on all the events. It's a huge sponsorship for us with DraftKings, and it's been happening. So if people would like to get action on the big events, specifically Double or Nothing, which is coming up there in Las Vegas in May, and again, the tickets are on sale, there's frequently great props and match betting on the Double or Nothing main event and some of the details around the show. Every big pay-per-view we do. And so when Double or Nothing comes to Las Vegas, you will be able to wager on it on DraftKings. And DraftKings is a great sponsor for AEW, and that's been a great partnership. So I've read some things about potentially more of that kind of action, but from what I've seen, there's already a lot of that going on through our partnership with DraftKings.
And synergy too. DraftKings new headquarters here in Vegas. You guys are coming to Vegas. I like what we're doing here. Tony Khan joining us here, 1140 The Bet. And, one of the things I appreciate about you is that you're very active on social media. You're very transparent on what's going on, talking to fans. Case in point, this Wednesday, you talked about it, is going to be a huge Dynamite. You said it yourself. It is a dream match. El Hijo Del Vikingo taking on Kenny Omega. And there was a lot of dialogue with some fans about just who is this guy? I don't know who he is. AEW keeps doing that, where they're having one of their main stars face someone that's not as well known to people, and I guess the mainstream wrestling fan. I guess, what's your response to some of those complaints?
I think it's great to introduce new wrestlers, and especially in this case, this is a wrestler who's very well known overseas, and it will bring audience with him, because there are hundreds of thousands of fans of Mexican Lucha Libre Pro Wrestling, and this is the world's premier luchador. And to have the top wrestler in Mexico right now come up to America and fight Kenny Omega, who has been the champion in Mexico in the past, and held the same AAA heavyweight championship that, is held by Vikingo. And I think to have a great wrestler like Vikingo come up to America with this reputation he's built, there's a lot of people that want to see him. And when we launched AEW, it was a similar mentality. Some of the wrestlers had not had as much exposure on television, and other wrestlers had a lot of exposure on television, and we were able to put the best roster together. Some people who really most wrestling fans, every wrestling fan would be familiar with Chris Jericho, I think it's fair to say, and anybody who would watch wrestling in the last 10 years would be very familiar with Jon Moxley also. So when AEW launched, we had some of these very familiar names a part of the company, and then I believe a number of other wrestlers who had reached prominence internationally, particularly in Japan, also in Mexico, came in and became big stars in AEW. And now we have other international stars, and we use this great platform we have Wednesdays on TBS, just like tomorrow night in this big match we're talking about for Wednesday Night Dynamite tomorrow on TBS, and also on Friday Night Rampage, where we've had great stars come in from overseas and give them the opportunity to wrestle some of the top names in American pro wrestling and have it shown all over the world in over 150 countries. So I take a very international view of trying to grow the business, and I think bringing in top stars from overseas, in particular where they have a great wrestling economy like Japan or in Mexico, we've had a lot of success bringing in wrestlers, whether it was our partnerships with New Japan Pro Wrestling through Forbidden Door, which was a massive business success, made a ton of money, and was a great show. We're going to do it again this year in Toronto with New Japan, or bringing in top wrestlers for our events like Double or Nothing there in Las Vegas, or even Wednesday Night Dynamite tomorrow night in Kansas City, and looking to bring in the top names and introduce them to the mainstream American TV audience.
Tony, I have to apologize, man. I'm sorry people are complaining that you're trying to give us new things, man. You're just trying to show us some dope stuff, man. We should be very appreciative of that. And next week, the 29th, you guys premiere AEW All Access. If you could just pick one thing that you think fans will love the most about getting to watch that program, what would that be?
I'm really excited for fans to see some of the backstage goings on in AEW, and in particular the story of Adam Cole and his comeback. I think I'm just so excited for fans to see what he went through. And of course, next Wednesday, we'll be in St. Louis, and Adam Cole is going to have his comeback match. We'll talk a little bit more about that this week on Dynamite, and I'm very excited for people to learn a little bit more about what he's been through. And on AEW All Access, which premieres next week after Dynamite, fans are going to get to see up close what Adam Cole went through, what he's been through, and how hard it's been to make it possible for him to come back from a very, very challenging brain injury, and how hard he worked going to brain therapy. And that was the only reason he left his house. And I had told him, if you never wrestle again, if you never want to wrestle again, I'm going to stand by you and be part of this company and a part of this family. And he really wanted to work towards coming back, but it was not 100% at all. And there was a long road and a lot of questions if he would ever wrestle again. And he's gotten to the point where he's back fully healthy, and we all feel really comfortable. Most importantly, he feels comfortable coming back and wrestling. And we're so excited for that match next Wednesday. We'll talk about it more tomorrow night on Wednesday Night Dynamite. And then, of course, next week, he's got the comeback match. It's a huge card tomorrow. And I think in addition to the matches tomorrow, I'm excited to hear from Adam Cole on the show, and excited to have his comeback match next week. And then right after that, for people to find out how hard it was to make that comeback match possible on AEW All Access. And that's just one of the great stories we're following on All Access, but certainly it's one of the most important stories, and it's very relevant to what's going to be happening next week on AEW.
And Tony, I know a lot of people want to talk to you and you got a lot of things to do. So let's close it out with three quick questions. You have been asked ad nauseum about Mercedes Monè, and obviously, rightfully so, obviously extremely talented beyond belief. But this weekend, it was actually not you being asked about it. It was her being asked about showing up at Forbidden Door. You brought it up. It's happening this summer in Toronto. Everyone's very excited for the second edition of Forbidden Door. And when she was asked about showing up, she said, quote, when is it? Is it in June? So far, it could be open. My July's open too, but I got to get that phone call from Unc. What's your response to that?
Well, it's very encouraging thing to hear, and I have so much respect for Mercedes. I think she's such a great pro wrestler, and certainly she's one of the best in the world. And any wrestling company in the world, including AEW, is very fortunate to have Mercedes. And currently, she's the world champion for our partner, New Japan Pro Wrestling, and I think she's a great champion for them. And I'm glad she brought up Forbidden Door because that's going to be a very exciting event. And certainly, the shadow of Mercedes is looming large in New Japan Pro Wrestling right now. And when AEW and New Japan clash at Forbidden Door, it'll be very interesting to see what happens. And certainly, she's one of their top stars in New Japan. So it makes for a very interesting situation going into Forbidden Door.
I'm trying to speak it into existence. Two more. When you see reports that Goldberg is now a free agent, is that someone that you believe that would fit well within the roster at AEW?
I have a lot of respect for Bill. I think Bill Goldberg's a great professional athlete and has had a great career in pro wrestling, and he's a very nice person. He actually has a lot of ties around the Jacksonville community. His family's from Jacksonville, and they've done so much great work in the community. There's a great hospital, the Wolfson's Children's Hospital, and Bill is related to the Wolfson family. He's a Wolfson, and so they've done so much great work in this community, and that's partially how I've gotten to know Bill. And I think he's a household name in pro wrestling, and certainly that's interesting to hear that that Bill is a free agent. So that's something to follow, and he's one of the biggest names in wrestling, and certainly will be something else to keep an eye on for us. But we have so many great wrestlers in AEW and so many exciting things happening in AEW week to week that it's always an exciting time. And but Bill is exceptionally exciting name and one of the biggest names in the sport. So certainly that's a big thing for us to pay attention to. So I would take notice of that. And it is interesting.
And our last question, you talk about big stars within AEW. Your current champion, MJF, how do I put it? After Revolution, said some passionate words to the media that was there in San Francisco at the Chase Center. As you sit there and watch him eat his pickles and does what he does, a couple of your facial expressions have been hilarious. So I just want to ask you straight up to close this out. What's going through your mind as MJF is talking passionately to the media?
Well, a few thoughts. Obviously, the pickles were quite a visual, and they were more than a visual when you're sitting right next to them. And
are you a fan of pickles, by the way? Because Chick-fil-A, I asked for them off.
Yeah, I do. I do like a pickle. There's nothing wrong with a good pickle. But,
that's how we're getting aggregated.
I wasn't wrong. I wasn't expecting to see them in the scrum setting in our post pay-per-view press conference, but he won an amazing match, one of the greatest matches ever in AEW. I think one of the best wrestling matches I personally have seen was the main event of Revolution, MJF versus Bryan Danielson in the 60-minute Iron Man match. It was incredible, and so he certainly earned the right to eat those pickles. And so I had a few different thoughts going through my head. Certainly it was an amazing main event, but how did we get here? And in this situation I was in right in that moment.
Oh boy, absolutely classic. What's also going to be classic, AEW Double or Nothing. synonymous here in Las Vegas to have it here. We're so thankful. T-Mobile Arena. Go get your tickets now as they are still available. I can't say that in 2 weeks. I'm thinking they're selling hot. Go get your tickets, man. Access.com, AEWTix.com as well. That's TIX. Also, Rampage and Dynamite. That'll be the Wednesday before May 24th at the MGM Grand Garden Arena. Those tickets are available as well. Dynamite this Wednesday. All Access premieres next Wednesday. You guys are very busy over there, Tony. Thank you so much for the time, man.
Thank you, Adrian. I really appreciate you giving me the chance to come on and talk about AEW tonight, and hopefully see you when we're out there in May for Double or Nothing, and hopefully see a lot of you listening when we're out there for Double or Nothing. It's going to be a great time, and I promise if you buy a ticket, you're going to have an awesome, awesome time Memorial Day weekend. It's a couple months away, but it's a hot ticket, and it's worth picking them up. And if you could watch the show, we're on tomorrow night on TBS and every Wednesday on TBS, and your support means the world. You, Adrian, and everybody listening, it's really, really just so important to us to have your loyalty, your support. And I can tell from talking to you, Adrian, you love wrestling, and it sounds like you love AEW, and I just really appreciate it. Thank you so much, man.